will discuss the development of cerebrum, lateral ventricle and third ventricle. So this is the diagram you are aware of. These are the three primary vesicles initially, that is prosencephalon, mesencephalon and rhombencephalon. We are finished with the development of the brain stem. Now in today's lecture we are going to start with the development of the forebrain, which include the telencephalon and diencephalon. But in today's lecture we will discuss this telencephalon portion. Now coming to the development of the cerebrum, it is derived from prosencephalon, which is divided into two lateral telencephalic vesicles which give rise to cerebral cortex and corpus striatum, and the median portion is diencephalon, which is going to form the thalamus, hypothalamus and related structures. So in the diagram you can see, so these are the this is the coronal section showing the two telencephalic vesicles. So in the middle portion, that is on the median side, the diencephalon is present. Now the telencephalic vesicle is initially small but rapidly increases its size and extends upwards, forwards and backwards, thus completely cover the lateral surface of the diencephalon and eventually fuses with it. You can see in the diagram the progress of the growth. The cerebral cortex and corpus striatum, they come to lie lateral to the thalamus and hypothalamus. So what is happening next with further growth? The telencephalic vesicles of the two sides, they come into apposition with each other, above, in front and behind the diencephalon. You can see the diagram. So in front, behind and above. So the growth is happening. So the cavity of the telencephalic vesicles is given the name lateral ventricles, and the cavity of the diencephalon is third ventricle, and these ventricles are connected with each other through the interventricular foramina. Now coming to the formation of the lateral ventricle, this lateral ventricle is the cavity of the telencephalic vesicle, which is initially it is spherical. So within the vesicle, it becomes elongated antero-posteriorly with forward and backward growth of the vesicle. So as the growth of the vesicle is happening, the growth of the lateral ventricle is happening. Now it is the posterior end of the vesicle, it grows downward and forward and form the temporal lobe. The cavity within it becomes the inferior horn. So it becomes the inferior horn, it becomes the anterior horn. This is the body. Now finally the occipital lobe is formed. You can see in this diagram the occipital lobe of the cerebral hemisphere is established, and the ventricle within it is becoming the posterior horn of lateral ventricle. Now coming to the formation of the third ventricle, with the enlargement of the telencephalic vesicles, their medial wall become opposed to each other. So you can see with the enlargement of these telencephalic vesicle, the medial wall, they are coming close to each other. In this groove, which is formed or bounded by the two medial surfaces, they are being continuous with each other in the floor of the groove. You can see here, and this floor of the groove is going to form the roof of the third ventricle. The third ventricle is the cavity of the diencephalon. Now just above the floor of this groove, the medial wall is invaginated laterally, as the name, that is choroid fissure. So the cavity of the invagination is choroid fissure. What is happening next to it? The fold of pia mater. This pia mater is covering all around here. So the fold of pia mater is also extending into this fissure, which is forming the tela choroidea. Now the bunch of capillary is formed within the fold and forms the choroid plexus. The tela choroidea is in intimate relation to the lateral ventricle as well as with the roof of the third ventricle, because the floor of this groove is going to form the roof of the third ventricle. So definitely once the choroid fissure is lying here in relation to the floor of this groove, it is lying in relation to the roof of the third ventricle too. With the formation of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle, the choroid fissure becomes C-shaped. Coming to the cerebral cortex, developmentally we divide the cerebral cortex into three parts. That is, the latest portion is neocortex, piriform cortex and hippocampal cortex. So latest is the neocortex. Now first we will discuss the hippocampal cortex, and this cortical region is formed by the migration of the cells from the mental layer into the overlying marginal layer. So this line is very important, how the growth of the cortex is happening. It is only the migration of the cells which are migrating from the mental layer to the marginal layer. Now what is included in the hippocampal cortex? So it is developing in the medial wall, so closely related to the choroid fissure. With the formation of the inferior horn, you can see it follows the curve of the choroid fissure, thus assumes a ring-like structure. Now superior part of the hippocampal cortex is soon separated from the fissure by the formation of the corpus callosum. So from the fissure it is separated by the development of this corpus callosum. Now part which remain rudimentary forms the inducium griseum. So this is portion is known as the inducium griseum. The lower part of the hippocampal cortex undergo more development, which is going to form the hippocampus and the dentate gyrus. So which is visible in the cavity of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. So this is hippocampal cortex. Now piriform cortex, the portion of that cortex which is related with the olfactory sensations, they are included in the piriform cortex, and it is very small. So what are the portions? That is uncus, anterior part of the parahippocampal gyrus, and anterior perforated substances. So this anterior perforated substance, anterior part of parahippocampal gyrus and uncus, they are visible on the inferior surface of the cerebral hemisphere. But we include, because the developmentally we include this cortical portion under piriform cortex. Now neocortex forms the whole of the cerebral cortex. As we are aware of the different surfaces of the cerebral hemisphere, spherolateral, medial and inferior, so they are included in neocortex. The development of the cortical region is happening, but in the inferior surface we exclude the piriform area, that is uncus. Then, as I have told you in this slide, anterior part of the parahippocampal gyrus and anterior perforated substance. So rest of the portion is included in the neocortex. Now coming to the corpus striatum, each telencephalic vesicle can be subdivided into a basal thick portion. So this is the telencephalic vesicle. This is a thick basal portion and thin portion, which is a superior one. Some cells in the mental layer of the thick basal part migrate to the marginal layer to form the cerebral cortex. Remaining cells, they form the corpus striatum. Now developing corpus striatum subdivided into medial and lateral part, which increases in thickness. Then fibers from into cerebral cortex, they pass through the developing corpus striatum. These bundles of fibers are called internal capsule. So this is the internal capsule which is passing through the corpus striatum. Now part lying deep to the internal capsule is given the name caudate nucleus, and the superficial portion is given the name lentiform nucleus, and this lentiform nucleus is further divided into putamen and globus pallidus. So this is how the development of this corpus striatum is happening. Now coming to the white matter of the cerebrum. Now what are the structures, or which is the part which is included in the white matter of cerebrum? These are the basically axons of the cortical cells, which connect the other areas of the cortex either in the same or opposite hemisphere, or they pass downward through the hemisphere on their way to brain and spinal cord. So when the axons, they pass from the cerebrum to the brain and spinal cord, they are forming the white matter of cerebrum. They may connect the thalamus, hypothalamus and basal ganglia to one another and to the cortex. So either these structures are connected with each other or with the cortex, or the axons that grow into the hemisphere, they from the brainstem and the spinal cord. So all these structures, all these axons, they form the white matter of the cerebrum. Now coming to the commissures of the telencephalon. Commissures are basically which are connecting the different areas of the cerebral hemispheres. From one side to another side, they are connecting the two telencephalic vesicles. So lamina terminalis is the cranial most part of the telencephalon and connects the two cerebral hemisphere. So all commissural fibers connecting the two cerebral hemisphere, they pass through the lamina terminalis. So what are these? Anterior commissure, corpus callosum, hippocampal commissure, posterior commissure, habenular commissure and optic chiasma. So they are just connecting the different areas on the two cerebral hemispheres. They cross to the opposite side to connect with the area present on the other cerebral hemisphere. So those are known as the commissures of telencephalon. This is how it is happening. The fiber are going from one to another side. So they are fibers crossing from one side to another side. So this is the lamina terminalis through which all the commissural fibers, they basically pass. Now coming to the developmental anomalies related with the development of this neural tube. So the anencephaly 4 times more common in females. Anencephaly in last trimester of the pregnancy is related with the hydroamnios due to lack of swelling mechanism in the fetus. Then encephalocele, it is the defective closure of the neural tube results in the herniation of the parts of the brain. Then Dandy-Walker malformation, atresia of foramen of Magendie and Luschka, resulting in the dilatation of the fourth ventricle and agenesis of the cerebellum. Microcephaly, it is underdeveloped brain causing mental retardation. Then Arnold-Chiari malformation is the downward displacement of the cerebellar tonsil through the foramen magnum. So these are the developmental anomalies related with the development of the different parts of the CNS. if you like my video, kindly subscribe it, share it, and thank you very much.